Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the psychology and leadership style of a guy who constantly, and I mean constantly, dominates sensationalized headlines. North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un. We're going to move past the typical breathless media narratives and look at the actual hard data, psychological assessments, and raw geopolitical context. We want to know what actually makes him tick.
So let's just jump right in with the big question. The exact same question that intelligence agencies all over the world are grappling with every single day. For years, the public has been fed this very specific, almost caricatured image of him. But if we are to truly understand the geopolitical reality here, we have to ask ourselves, are we looking at a cartoonish punchline or a highly calculated global threat?
You know, former CIA analysts actually call this regime the hardest of the hard targets. And a huge reason for that is because of two overlapping yet totally contradictory myths. On one hand, you have this image of an erratic, tantrum-throwing chubby baby just playing with his toys. I mean, think of the insults like Rocket Man or those magazine covers literally depicting him as an infant. But then on the flip side, because of his rapid nuclear advancements and massive cyber attacks, he's somehow also seen as this unstoppable 10-foot-tall giant. These dual myths kind of mash up his capabilities with his intentions, making it incredibly hard to see the rational actor hiding underneath it all.
All right, moving into Section 1, Profile of a Dictator.
To figure out who we're actually dealing with, we've got to look at the empirical data. Analysts use something called the Millen Inventory of Diagnostic Criteria. Basically, it's a tool used to profile political leaders based on biographical and observational data. And when you run Kim Jong-un through it, a pretty surprising picture emerges. He classifies as a high-dominance extrovert. So right off the bat, he actually isn't the withdrawn, paranoid recluse hiding in a bunker that usually comes to mind when we picture a dictator. Let's break down those diagnostic scores for a second. His primary traits tie at a prominent 15 out of 15 for both outgoing and dominant patterns. Basically, he demands to be the center of attention and requires absolute obedience. But look at the secondary traits. He scores a 5 in accommodating, ambitious, and dauntless. This is absolutely crucial to understand him. His aggressive nature is surprisingly blended with a desire for social approval and a really pragmatic streak. He actually wants to be liked. And get this, he will cooperate if it helps him achieve his goals.
But hold on, do not mistake accommodating for soft. That dominant trait, it is literally lethal. To really grasp his sheer ruthlessness, just consider this number, 340. That is the estimated number of executions of officials and family members that he ordered between 2011 and 2016 alone, just to consolidate his power. That even includes his own uncle, who he publicly had labeled human scum. He tolerates exactly 0 challenges to his authority.
But then, in this bizarre contrast to all that brutality, we see his outgoing and accommodating traits pop up in his Byung-jin policy. That's his push to develop the military and the economy at the same time. Influenced by his privileged upbringing over in Switzerland, he's heavily invested in modern luxury. We're talking Alp-style ski resorts, massive water parks, riding clubs, world-class cosmetics factories, the whole shebang. He desperately wants to project this image of a prosperous, modern state, mostly to buy the ongoing loyalty of his elites.
So that leads us right into Section 2, Unorthodox Diplomacy. How does this complex personality actually play out on the world stage? Well, when you filter his high-dominance extroversion through the constraints of his reality, it results in a highly active, independent foreign policy. He actively shuns any commitments that might limit his independence for sure. But he is highly flexible and surprisingly pragmatic when he spots an advantage to be gained. And here's a textbook example of that accommodating trait in action. Back in September 2020, a South Korean fisheries official was shot by North Korean troops. Now, historically, Pyongyang just ignores or totally deflects these kinds of incidents. But Kim? He sent a highly unusual, super prompt apology directly to South Korea's president, literally saying he was very sorry. Why do that? Because it instantly de-escalated the tension and preserved his options for future benefits from Seoul. It was a perfectly calculated move by a guy who knows exactly when it pays to yield.
He's also got another pragmatic tool in his arsenal, sports diplomacy. Because his state is heavily sanctioned and officially isolated from the world, he uses athletics to totally bypass traditional political barriers. It is honestly the perfect stage for his extroverted personality. It lets him step completely outside rigid official state channels and frankly put on a really good show.
You absolutely know this one, his famous basketball diplomacy.
This was all fueled by a childhood obsession with the 90s Chicago Bulls, which actually started from VHS tapes sent to him while he was studying in Switzerland. So he brings in former NBA star Dennis Rodman. By using a celebrity athlete as a sort of anti-diplomat, he fostered engagement with a hostile West in a way that traditional politicians in suits absolutely couldn't. It was unconventional, highly visible, and a massive flex.
Okay, let's pivot to Section 3, the Gaddafi lesson.
So, what about the nukes? To understand why he aggressively clings to his weapons, we have to look at the exact historical context he inherited. In 2010 and 2011, the Arab Spring was toppling these seemingly invincible regimes left and right. Then, in October 2011, Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi, a guy who had voluntarily given up his nuclear weapons for promises of engagement, was overthrown and brutally killed in the streets. Just 2 months later, Kim Jong-un assumes power. Think about that. Those bloody images of Gaddafi were absolutely seared into the young leader's brain.
The lesson Kim learned from Libya was crystal clear. If you have nukes, never ever give them up. And if you don't have them, get them immediately. His absolute refusal to denuclearize isn't the erratic behavior of a madman. Not at all. It is a deeply calculated, highly rational survival strategy learned directly from watching the fatal mistakes of other dictators.
Bringing it all together, we hit Section 4, the pragmatic extrovert.
So how does he manage the day-to-day survival of his regime right now? He does it through a brilliantly orchestrated good cop, bad cop routine with his sister, Kim Yo-jong. Recently, she's taken on the role of the aggressive hawk. She even ordered the explosive demolition of an inter-Korean liaison office. But using his sister to project dominance gives him immense strategic flexibility. It frees him up to exercise those accommodating traits we talked about earlier, so he can step in later as the reasonable, de-escalating statesman whenever it serves his overall agenda.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. I want to leave you with this. If we finally strip away the caricatures, forget the fat baby, forget the madman, the cartoon punchline, and actually recognize the highly rational, calculating, and flexible leader he truly is, how must global diplomacy change? Are we actually prepared to negotiate with a pragmatic extrovert who knows exactly how to play the game, or are we going to stay stuck negotiating with the villain in our own heads? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.